Hello and welcome to our channel today. Today I am interviewing Victoria and she's a soul activation coach.
Hello everyone, and I'm being interviewed by Patricia and she is a healing coach.
Thank you so much, Victoria. Welcome to our channel once again. It's lovely to be here with you. We are so thrilled to continue this episode about avoidant versus anxious attachment style. As we mentioned on the previous episode, this is going to be a 3-series episodes, where the first one I was interviewed by Victoria on my previous avoidant attachment style, and I'm interviewing Victoria today because she grew up with an anxious attachment style. The next episode, we're going to be having a conversation, the two of us, with the insights that we gained from these 2 episodes and just a quick, chill vibe. So, all right, Victoria, do you want to add anything to that?
I think you said it perfectly. I'm just really happy to be here, to be back with you, with our listeners, and bring value to the world and bring more consciousness to the world about these things and how we can stand more in our power. So yeah, absolutely. Let's get started, my darling.
To standing in our power. Woo!
That's why we call ourselves conscious souls, right?
Yes. Okay. My first question to you, Victoria, is how would you describe, from your experience and perspective, the anxious attachment style?
For me, from my experience, and I want to add something, if I may, in the beginning. We are amazing, powerful beings that are being born, and what happens to us or for us in our childhood does not necessarily has to define who we become in the future. So I'm going to describe my experience now that I'm remembering who I really am, and I'm going to go deep if you're ready for that. So, okay, from my experience, it was, even though I have been left alone with my emotions, every time I needed emotional support, I felt like I could not survive without the other. And what made me aware of something being off, other than the lack of emotional support, was also that I was happy, or in the illusion of being happy, of getting breadcrumbs and not really knowing that I deserved the whole pie, if that makes sense. So it was a feeling of loneliness, emotional loneliness, an extreme fear of being abandoned, abandoned emotionally and / or physically. Basically, a learned helplessness, a conditioned helplessness that you needed the other to kind of even survive in order to feel some kind of connection to someone, if that makes sense.
This sounds like a lot of pain.
Oh, it was. It was.
Thank you so much for sharing that with us, Victoria. I'm sure a lot of people can relate to that. Everyone has their own experiences and perspectives, and this is in no way defining the anxious attachment style, but Victoria's experience. And this way, we are hoping to connect with anyone out there that is going through the same, or that always felt like this but didn't know where it came from and how it was affecting them. And we are here to bring the unconscious to the conscious and help everyone. So I hope Victoria being here today is what you needed to hear in order to heal. So thank you, Victoria, for sharing that and for being so vulnerable with us today. I can't wait to see the results of this interview.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you for your compassion. And it's just wonderful knowing about it now and seeing that this pain has created at the same time an amazing inner strength. And so that's what I'm really grateful for. But yeah, let's dive deep. I'm ready.
Yeah, I think I just want to add that, we go as human beings, we go to these challenges in our life But and I think that while we're in the challenge, it feels hard. It feels like it's a curse. It feels like, why us? And I think once we get out of it, we see the blessings of it. And we see how we needed to actually go through that to grow and become the person that we are today. And that without an experience, we would not be who we are. All right. Are you ready for our next question?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Can you describe a relationship in your life, Victoria, where you felt like this anxious attachment style has manifested? And what specific behaviors in this relationship or situation have manifested it within you?
Okay, I have to start from the very beginning. When I was a little child, I have honestly felt that there was something off because I was highly sensitive and highly observing when I was little. And I observed other interactions of mothers with their children, like when we were visiting someone or, and I realized that my mother was different with me than the relationships that I observed. And so I actually raised the question when I was kind of like 10, 11 years old. Okay, what is off here? What is going wrong? So there have been specific behaviors. Like I remember one childhood, like a very traumatic experience, that I was very afraid of darkness when I was a little child. And I remember, I don't know how old I was, maybe, 8, 9 years old. And I was lying in my bed one night and I was very, very afraid of the darkness. And suddenly I felt a presence in my room. And I always put earplugs in because I was unable to hear anything. I was so afraid that I didn't even want to hear what was going on around. So that night, I felt like there was a presence in my room. And then I looked around and then I saw actually a shadow. And then I took the earplugs out and then I heard someone whispering. And in this shock, I started screaming, but I was in panic. I didn't even realize that I was screaming. I mean, I remember I was screaming out of control. And then suddenly the light turns on. My mother turned towards me, slapped me, and told me why would I scream like a crazy, and left, turned around, turned the lights off, and slammed the door behind her. And I basically was left alone, crying myself into sleep. So that was an experience that made me think a lot. Like I felt, okay, this is not normal behavior. Like if I had a child, I would not treat my child that way. And then it was triggered again in my marriage. Marriage is romantic relationships. And I'm touching upon this to bring an awareness that these anxious attachment styles or avoidant, these insecure attachment styles, they start in our childhood because of behavior that has nothing to do with us. And, I wouldn't even say that my mother did something wrong. I mean, she just did the best that she was aware of in this moment, which might not have been the best that I would have needed in that moment. But anyway, so then over the years in my marriage, it was triggered again because I realized already at an early stage that I did not get emotional support from my ex-husband. And I always wondered why. And when I touched upon it, and when I was asking him and when I was telling him, listen, I would need you to be there for me when I'm feeling like this. And then he was, he would ask, okay, what do you need? And I would tell him what I would need. But he wasn't able to give it to me. And even though I should have seen that as a red flag, I stayed in that marriage. I stayed in that marriage because I felt like I could not survive without him, So in a way, I realized back then that I had such a little sense of self or no sense of self at all, that not only he was the primary person in my life, not only I put him on a pedestal, so to speak, like all his emotions, everything that he felt was what was important. What I felt was not important. And I felt like it wasn't just, but in a way I could deal with it because I felt like he was providing other things that I realized were important for me at that stage, which today I'm thinking completely different about it, of course. But yeah, we gain our experiences in hindsight. So yeah, what triggered this experience is left alone when I needed emotional support, being disrespected. When I was trying to communicate my boundaries, they were disrespected, or I was emotionally abandoned. Or I remember a situation similar than the one that I explained to you from my childhood. I was often crying and he left me alone. He wasn't there for me when I needed support the most, you know. So that was basically, for me, these were all red flags, if that gives you a deeper understanding of what triggered it.
Thank you again for sharing such vulnerable experiences, Victoria. I would love to ask, how long did you stay with your ex-husband?
In total, we were together 20 years. And we had 6 different marriage counselors. And
What?
no one was able to tell us what was going on. Even though I was very clear, I was explaining myself, but none of these, we might have not caught the best ones out there. But yeah.
Who chose the counselors? Was it you or him or like a...
Both of us equally. The 2 last ones, my ex-husband chose them. And then the ones before, we chose them together.
You know, these 20 years goes to show that even if you've been in this pattern for so long, you don't have to stay. Even if you might think, oh, but I've done this for 20 years. This is who I am. This is what I do. I invested so much in this relationship. If you're not being treated right, out.
Exactly.
And it's so inspiring to see that after 20 years, which is a long time, Victoria, to be with someone, you had the strength to leave, to be out, and to be okay with that. Okay, I was so immersed in that question that I forgot everything I had to ask. Thank you so much for sharing once again.
Absolutely.
If you don't want to add anything, then I'm going to proceed to the next question.
Go ahead, yeah.
It was very interesting what you mentioned about your mom and how she was in your room, you know, in your face almost, and was in the dark watching you sleep. And out of nowhere, when you actually felt her presence, she got like as if she didn't hold herself accountable for what she was causing you. And your reaction to her action was completely out of place. What feelings did you get in that situation, like as if it was happening? What did you feel? Not what did you feel after, but during.
I felt very left alone. I felt like I had the weight of the world on my shoulders. Like no one would ever understand what I feel. No one would ever care about how I feel. Basically, that's what I was felt in that moment. Very, very alone. Kind of like an alien, you know, like somebody, like a starseed falling onto this earth and then getting acquainted with all these violent patterns around and feeling like completely off place, you know, because this is not the truth that I remembered. So what I always felt when I was left alone in those moments is that there was another presence there for me, a presence that was not physical, but it was very much there. And I believe that this was the presence that was singing me lullabies so that I could fall back asleep. But from a human perspective, I felt very, very lonely. And I even had suicidal thoughts when I was a child and I was a teenager. I mean, I think I told you that I often felt like if I would no longer be here, would my mom that I loved so much, would she regret the way she treated me? That was the question I was always asking myself.
So because your mother completely left you abandoned and alone in this experience, you as a child took it as, okay, if the only person in the world that loves me, you know, obviously this is all unconsciously, if the only person in the world that's supposed to love me and is my caregiver is not there for me and doesn't understand me, then it means that no one will. And that is how attachments begin. So I feel like it's very crucial that you share this with us today, the feeling that you had, which is the abandonment and the loneliness that you had from your mom, and then you project that into the whole world, because at that moment your mom is your whole world. Your parents are your whole world.
Yeah, she was my whole world because my dad wasn't really in the picture. He worked a lot while he was there. And then they got divorced when I was 13 and he moved away. So it was true. My mom was the whole world. And I'm really grateful that you touched upon this, because when we wake up like this, we get a sense that everyone will hurt us and that the world out there is not a safe place because people are out there to hurt you. Like, this is one of the primary kind of like wrong beliefs that I got from these experiences, that people are out there to hurt you, which is why I didn't feel safe, which is why I couldn't be myself, which is why I held back from who I really was. I was trying to be invisible. So this is where it all stems from. Absolutely, Patricia.
So we could, in a way, say that your relationship towards the outside world is a reflection of the relationship with your primary caregiver.
Absolutely.
In the beginning of your life.
In the beginning of your life, until you yourself take the courage and you change your beliefs. You become aware of these limiting beliefs, and then you change them, transform them, and then you create other beliefs that are actually serving you. This is, I guess, why I do today what I do as soul activation coach, in order to help people doing this, you know. Because this is a very, very crucial thing. If we go out into the world, if we live our whole life with this belief that the world is hostile, and I remember Albert Einstein, he already said that the most important decision that you do in your life is to think either if the world is hostile or if the world is friendly. And so with these two simple sentences, everything changes, because we attract our reality, right?
Exactly. Wow, Victoria, this interview is going so well. I love everything that we're sharing with everyone. I think it's very important insights. All right, then if you have nothing to add, I would like to move forward to our next question.
I'm ready. Go ahead.
Maybe you have answered this already a little bit, but I would like to go more into it. Is when did you first become aware that this was actually an attachment style? And it was the anxious attachment style. And how did this awareness impact your relationships at the time?
Okay, so this is a good question. At first, I became aware that this was kind of like an attachment style. I mean, how can I say this, Patricia? I did not know about the term anxious attachment just until recently. But I could define in my marriage, wait a moment, I'm repeating the same patterns here. Something is happening that is reminding me of my childhood. So I guess there was a certain awareness, even though I did not have the label for these symptoms yet. But I could feel something was off because patterns were repeating from my childhood. Quickly, as a summary for anxious attachment style, if you are anxiously attached, then you have a very tiny sense of self or no sense of self at all. You have difficulty setting boundaries. You have difficulty to speak up for yourself. You're always seeking for outside approval. And of course, there are other symptoms, but these were the primary ones for me. And then, of course, you put the other one on a pedestal. So I realized that, okay, wait a moment. If I put myself first now, if I look after myself first, after my emotions, and that I get what I need, how would this impact my marriage? And so I started implementing different things in my marriage, like, for example, speaking up for myself, or telling my ex-husband when I needed emotional support, which I told you before. And I realized that he had a hard time giving it to me. And of course, this is normal, because if you start implementing boundaries after somebody feels that they can treat you like a doormat, I think it's kind of like very difficult for the other person to adapt to your new kind of being. And so I realized that it was hard for him. And so I realized that we were more and more drifting apart, which kind of signalized the end of the relationship.
Would you say that your ex-husband was an avoidant attachment style?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. And he might not be aware of it, because this is another thing that I realized, is that anxious attached people are looking for solutions more than avoidant attached people. you know. And I really honor you, Patricia, for having done the inner work, because avoidant, as the name already says, is you don't really have the tendency to actually look into your behavior. You rather avoid these feelings and you concentrate, you distract yourself with something else.
Yeah, I feel like that could be a part of avoidant attachment style, but I feel like that could also be anxious attachment style, like if we, or just a human behavior, avoiding your feelings. I don't think it's necessarily just avoidant attachment, but just a human behavior to be scared of your feelings and avoid them. Okay, well, wow. I'm so grateful that the relationship has ended, Victoria, for you. So grateful for that.
Today, I'm grateful for that too. And I wish him the best, you know, don't get me wrong. He is a beautiful soul. He did his best, just like my mom did. And I'm in a state of gratefulness for my experiences and their experiences and even our interactions.
Exactly. All right, before we move on to the next question, I just wanted to highlight that although everyone has the urge to avoid their feelings, what avoidants do is that when things get hard, they avoid the other person. It's much more like they avoid the other person, whereas I feel like anxious attachment style, they're like, let me grab the person and like get it so we can work through this together. And the avoidant is like, nope, no. So in that way, that's how they avoid within the avoidant attachment style.
Yeah, I could not agree more. And the word you were looking for, anxious attached people they have a tendency to cling to the other person they feel the connection to, even though this connection is not a healthy one. Whereas avoidantly attached people have the tendency to disregard or reject the other person.
And by rejecting the other person, they're rejecting themselves.
Of course.
I would just want to add extra question here. And this is going to be our conclusion for our interview here. Because Victoria actually attended a webinar about the insecure attachment styles last week. She shared with me some insights that she got about the fact that she thought that most women were anxious and most men were avoidant. And actually, that's not true. And I would love for you to dive a little deep on that as a conclusion for today, that we are not alone. You only feel alone because you're not expressing and sharing your experience with others. And this is very important because I feel like this is what Victoria got from this webinar last week. She realized so much more about her attachment style and the fact that everyone around us is going through the same. So please elaborate a little bit on that if you'd like to, Victoria.
Thank you, my darling. And I would also, at this moment, I would like to appreciate my gratitude for your compassion, your beautiful, warm voice. I could really feel that you felt with me and that you kind of held me while I was sharing my experiences. And that really is precious, Patricia. So thank you for that. What I learned is that there are men also out there that are anxious attachment style and women with avoidant attachment style. And this is the vicious cycle, you know, it goes on and on and on until one in the family becomes aware and breaks that pattern. It also makes sense that men are more the avoidant. Men are not really encouraged by the society to acknowledge their feelings. And they're already told as little boy, or stop crying, or don't be such a wimp, or whatever, you know. So men are already conditioned not to express their feelings, whereas we women are in a way differently conditioned. And so it was kind of like a peaceful awakening that no matter what gender we are, we can have similar symptoms. And the way out of it is just our own awareness, is questioning how we feel and then seek for answers and not being happy with the status quo. As long as you're not happy, then life will not be happy, because you are such an important part of life. And so your happiness matters. So don't ever stop searching until you really find happiness and peace inside.
Exactly. Let's move on to our last question for this interview. Victoria, what advice do you have for our listeners, our beautiful souls around the world that are struggling with that same challenge and they want to overcome the anxious attachment style. What do you have to say to them as if they're here with us right now?
Okay, the first thing I want to say is start remembering who you truly are. You are an amazingly beautiful, powerful, unique, talented, brilliant, magnificent expression of life. And unfortunately, no one ever told you, or maybe the people that should have given you that sense, they were not able to give you that sense of self because they didn't feel that for themselves. So they just projected their own wounds. Remember who you truly are. And when you remember who you are, you will realize that there is a presence that is loving you more than you can imagine. Approve of yourself. Look at yourself into the mirror and tell yourself every morning, look into your left eye because the left eye represents the inner child. Get up in the morning, get naked in front of the mirror and look into your left eye and just tell yourself, I love you. And for me, you're the most important being in this world and I got you. I got your back. You're not alone. No one is ever gonna hurt you again because I'm here now. I'll take care of you. I got your back. You know, give yourself the approval that you were looking for from other people. Do not look for approval anymore from other people, but look for emotional support. And there is a big difference between the two. And the second big thing that I would mention for our listeners is for us who have been growing up with a tendency of anxious attachment style, it's very hard for us to have healthy boundaries because when we have spoken out our boundaries when we were little, those boundaries were often, they were taken to the trash bin, or we were emotionally or even physically abandoned, or we were in any way misused or abused for even having spoken up for ourselves. So it's very, very hard for people that have been growing up with the same style to have healthy boundaries. And for me, actually, what is showing me that I'm on a good way, that I'm moving out of these toxic relationship styles, is to even have the desire to set boundaries. Because setting boundaries and having the desire to set boundaries, again, is a big difference. So develop a healthy sense of wanting to set boundaries when you feel like something is off. And then the third advice I would give that is, if ever you feel a red flag in your relationship, in your romantic relationship, let's say you're in a romantic relationship, let go. Let go, wish them well and walk away and be with yourself.
Victoria, you are so beautiful.
Thank you.
This was such a magnificent bundle of advices that I think our audience is gonna love. So thank you so much for that. I really appreciate you, and everything you share with us here today has been magnificent. And also we touched upon it last week. As an anxious attachment style child, having avoidant attachment style parents, you have to change yourself to make them happy. And as an avoidant attachment style child, you have to change yourself to make your anxious attachment style parents happy. Both ways, you're not being yourself. You are adapting to survive. And this is why people with insecure attachment styles have a very difficult time understanding who they are. And I think that's the conclusion of today, Victoria. Thank you so much for sharing everything and being so vulnerable with us. We appreciate it so much. Wow. Everyone, thank you for being here. We love sharing our insights with you. We encourage you to keep growing, being your true self on this journey. Love yourself. We'll be here for you. And we love you.
We love you. Amen. Bye.
Bye.